Hi there, I'm Mrs F, and this is my lesson on the Nazi persecution of the Jews. We're currently looking at topic 4 of the Edexcel specification, Life in Nazi Germany. And this is my very last lesson, having a look at the persecution of the Jews, the second of my lessons on the persecution of minorities. Anti-Jewish views, also known as antisemitism, had been common throughout Europe for centuries for a number of different reasons. First of all, Jews had a different religion, customs, and looks to other Europeans, which made them stand out as being different. A lot of anti-Semitism had originated within Christianity, where some Christians hated Jews, blaming them for the execution of Christ, and then, in times of crisis, blaming them for other problems, for example, the Black Death in the 14th century and further outbreaks of the plague. Jews had gained a reputation as being money lenders and being successful in finance and business, creating jealousy towards them. And this is because in the past, Christians had not been allowed to charge interest on loans, but Jewish people had. And of course, that had caused this kind of anger and resentment. In many European countries, Jews had been forced to live in run-down areas of towns called ghettos. The picture that you see on the screen there is of Shylock the Jew from Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, which had reinforced some of these prejudices against Jewish people. By the 1930s, anti-Semitism had become particularly strong in Germany. The first reason for this is because Germany had only united as a single country in 1871. And one of the negative factors in German nationalism was creating hatred towards a common enemy, and the Jews had been a convenient scapegoat or enemy for these nationalists. Another reason why anti-Semitism had grown is because when times are hard, people often look for other people to blame because they don't want to blame themselves. So with German defeat in the First World War, the hated Treaty of Versailles, hyperinflation and the Great Depression, Jewish people could be blamed with very little evidence by nationalist politicians such as Hitler, who when he came to power in 1933 had complete freedom to give vent to this bitterness. And even Germans with more moderate views allowed them to be influenced by Nazi propaganda. A famous example is the poster there for an exhibition called The Eternal Jew, which took place in 1937, which was designed to reinforce horrible stereotypes about the Jewish people, and it was put on by Goebbels. There were less than 500,000 Jews in Germany in 1933, which was less than 1% of the population. But even before Hitler became Chancellor, he had made clear that action against the Jews would be a priority. And certainly the persecution started very early in his chancellorship. One aspect of this early persecution was a Nazi campaign against Jewish shops and businesses. On the 30th of March 1933, the Nazi Party announced that from 10 a.m. on the 1st of April, an official boycott would begin of all Jewish businesses, doctors and lawyers. Stormtroopers were sent to paint Jewish stars, or the word Jude, German for Jew, outside Jewish businesses. And as you can see in the picture, they then stood outside with banners, discouraging people from going inside. The boycott was presented to the German people as an act of revenge for the bad international press that Germany had received when Hitler became Chancellor. The Nazis claimed that German and foreign Jews were spreading atrocity stories to damage Germany's reputation. Although the boycott only lasted one day and was ignored by many individual Germans, it was important because it marked the beginning of a nationwide campaign against the Jews in Germany that would eventually result in the horrors of the Holocaust. The Nazis also gradually excluded Jews from positions of power or wealth. So from April 1933, Jews were banned from government jobs and Jewish civil servants and teachers were sacked. From September 1933, Jews were banned from inheriting land, and Jewish people were not allowed to own farms either. We've already seen in a previous lesson that books by Jewish authors were publicly burnt in huge bonfires, and new eugenics lessons were introduced which taught that Jewish people were subhuman. Nazis who controlled local councils also began to follow the lead of the Nazi government. So from 1934, some local councils banned Jews from parks and swimming pools. Others provided separate yellow park benches for Jews to keep normal Germans safe. And that's what you see in the picture there, a boy sitting on a bench in a park with words painted on the bench saying for Aryans only. For those of you who've studied civil rights in the USA, you will see that there's a lot in common with the Jim Crow laws in the southern states of the USA, which actually provided an inspiration for the Nazis. As the Nazis established themselves in power, persecution became worse. On the 15th of September 1935, a set of changes called the Nuremberg Laws were passed. Two of these laws in particular increased the persecution of the Jews. The first of these was the Reich Law on Citizenship, which stated that only those of German blood could be German citizens. Jewish people became German subjects instead of citizens, which meant they lost the rights of citizenship, such as the right to vote, the right to hold government office, and the right to hold German passports. In order to do this, they had to define what a Jew was, and the definition which the law adopted was that anyone with 3 or 4 grandparents who practiced the Jewish religion would be considered to be a Jew. And it was quite a random definition in some ways, because even if an individual didn't define themselves as a Jew, they might still fall under the category. So, for example, Germans who had not practiced Judaism for years found themselves in the grip of Nazi terror. Even people with Jewish grandparents who had converted to Christianity were defined as Jews. Secondly, the Nazis also passed the Law for the Protection of the Hereditary Health of the German People in October 1935, which required all prospective marriage partners to obtain from the public health authorities a certificate of fitness to marry. These certificates were refused to anyone suffering from hereditary illnesses and contagious diseases, and those attempting to marry in violation of the Nuremberg Laws, which forbade Jews from marrying German citizens and forbade sexual relations between Jews and German citizens. The image that you see on the screen there is a chart to explain the Nuremberg Laws. White circles represent Aryan Germans, black circles represent Jews, and partially shaded circles represent mixed-race individuals. With some countries threatening to boycott the Berlin Olympics in 1936, the Nazis removed visible anti-Semitic signs and propaganda in order to try and stop that from happening. But less visible persecution did continue. From 1938, matters became more ominous for Jewish people. They were ordered to register all wealth and property. Another thing that they did in October was to invalidate all German passports held by Jews. They had to surrender their old passports, which would only be valid after the letter J had been stamped on them, as you can see in the picture on the screen there. Also, the authorities decreed that by the start of 1939, Jewish men and women with names that were of non-Jewish origin had to add Israel or Sarah to their given names. And you also see that in the image there, where the middle name of Sarah has been added to the passport. On the night of November the 9th, 1938, violent anti-Jewish demonstrations broke out across Germany, Austria, and German-speaking areas of Czechoslovakia. Nazi officials depicted the riots as justified, spontaneous reactions to the assassination of a German foreign ambassador who had been shot 2 days earlier by a Polish Jew, distraught over the deportation of his family from Germany. Over the next 48 hours, violent mobs, who were spurred on by Nazi officials, destroyed hundreds of synagogues, burning or desecrating Jewish religious artifacts along the way. Acting on orders from Gestapo headquarters, police officers and firefighters did nothing to prevent the destruction, with over 7,500 Jewish shops damaged or destroyed and 400 synagogues burned to the ground. Nearly 100 Jewish people died, and in the wake of Kristallnacht, 30,000 were sent to concentration camps. To rub salt into the wound, Jews were made to pay a fine of 1 billion marks to the government for the damage which had been done to their property, and then that property in itself was then confiscated. Kristallnacht was highly important, marking a shift from anti-Semitic language and laws to the violent, aggressive anti-Jewish measures that would culminate in the Holocaust. Ever since 1933, the Nazis had been encouraging Jews to voluntarily emigrate from the country. But in January 1939, they decided to forcibly evict all Jews from Germany. So the Reich Office for Jewish Emigration was set up under Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Gestapo. His task was to deport all of Germany's Jews. 150,000 Jews were deported, but to add insult to injury, they had to pay a large tax before they could leave. Tragically, a large number of these refugees, approximately 100,000, took refuge in countries which were conquered by Germany in World War II, and so they still ended up being deported and killed in the death camps set up when the Holocaust became a policy in 1942. What's really upsetting is that a lot of countries, including Britain and the USA, were opposed to accepting more Jewish refugees. And when a conference was held in 1938, only one country actually agreed to take in more refugees, which is very sad. And that country was the Dominican Republic, which is only quite small anyway. Commenting on this conference, the German government gleefully noted how astounding it was that foreign countries criticised them for their treatment of the Jews, but refused to accept more refugees. The Nazi government did keep some atrocities against Jews a secret, but most of what happened to the Jews between 1933 and 1939 was known both within Germany and in other countries. And it's very difficult to understand why more wasn't done to stop this persecution. We do know that the Nazis severely dealt with people who opposed them, so some Germans would have been too scared to. Other people convinced themselves that the suffering inflicted on the Jews wasn't real, or they just ignored it entirely. And then there were those Germans who were actually convinced by propaganda and supported and even took part in the persecution, for example, in the events of Kristallnacht. This concludes the last of my lessons on Weimar and Nazi Germany. I hope that you found them useful. Thank you and goodbye.